Our passage this morning is in Matthew chapter 26. In this series, we've looked at Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and we've talked about the different elements of this prayer that Jesus has had. But as you turn to Matthew chapter 26, I just want to ask you this question. What moves you? What moves you? Maybe emotionally. I think about in my own life. I live in a home, my wife and 4 daughters. It's a lot of estrogen there. And I say sometimes, like we were picking a movie to watch on Friday night. We're going to watch a family movie night. We're going to watch a movie. I'm trying to pick action. They're trying to pick romance. They love love. And they also enjoy crying when they watch stories told. I tend to be dead inside when it comes to watching things like that. And so I don't usually get emotional. Well, the other day, I was watching a show that my wife and I were watching together, but she was gone, so I was ahead. And I'm watching, and I see this scene, and this guy is talking, and he's trying to warn people not to make some of the mistakes he's made. Well, some mistakes that I've made, and so I start crying, and I'm watching. My wife comes home, I've been crying. And I was like, you got to watch this scene. She watches it. Nothing. Like Rob surgically turns to me, what is it that moved you about this scene? Different things move different people, right? And sometimes it's emotional, and sometimes it's physical. Like you actually move into action. I was reading this week some stories of people that move to action. How about this one? This woman in a McDonald's drive-thru ordered 10-piece McNuggets, paid for the McNuggets. They didn't have them. What do you think she did? You probably think she asked to speak to the manager. Nope, she called 911 3 times. It was reported on Fox News. Her name, Latricia Goodman, and she's from Florida, of course. And she called, and I'm going to read you the transcript. It says, "This is an emergency." Okay, we might want to define terms here, but anyway, "If I would have known they didn't have McNuggets, I wouldn't have given my money. And now she wants to give me a McDouble. The travesty. We all know McDoubles are on the dollar menu. 10-piece nuggets aren't." Oh, wait, I'm the only one that goes there. I forgot. Okay. She wants to give me a McDouble, but I don't want one. Well, that's probably my tone. Sorry about that. She's trying to force me to eat off the menu, and I don't want it, she told the 911 dispatcher. The dispatcher, the first dispatcher, asked to speak to the manager. I don't know why they didn't just give her her money back, but they didn't. They tried to get her to order something else. She called back again. This dispatcher said, and I quote, "We've got an officer coming out there to talk to you." She was cited and fined for calling 911 with what was not an emergency. So if you think to yourself that will solve your problems, you will pay money, just so you know. I don't know if it was the money, the injustice, but it moved her. How about this guy? It reminds me of David in the Old Testament, and this just happened. A guy in California, his pit bull, 90-pound pit bull, was grabbed by a 350-pound bear and dragged down the street. What he does reminds me of David when he's talking to Saul, and he's like, hey, when a lion or bear came and grabbed one of my ewe lambs, I chased the lion or bear down, and I think to myself sometimes, did you really? There was no one there. This guy did. Look at this. He said, and I quote, his name, a picture of him here, Caleb Benham, and his dog, "I heard a growl, looked about 75 to 100 feet down, and the bear was dragging him, his dog, by his head and his mouth," he told the Sacramento local news. "Honestly, the only thing I could think of was, save my baby." Then listen to this. If this doesn't sound like a verse, "I just ran down there, plowed into the bear, tackled it, grabbed it by the throat, and started hitting it in the face and in the eye until it let go." Way to go, Caleb. All right. I know some of y'all love your dogs. Would you do that? Neuroscientists tell us the things that move us are pain and desire, that we run from pain and we chase after desire. What moves you? Emotionally, spiritually, physically, and what if your desires or your pain are taking you down a route other than God's plan? Danger. So far in this series, we've looked at some of the things you'd expect us to look at. In week 1, I called it the warrior's way, and we talked about the battle that Jesus battles in private before the cross, public. Him alone in the garden with just 3 of his friends and some of the rest of the guys off at a distance. But who really knew other than them? But the world saw him on the cross, the warrior's way. Then in week 2, we looked at the Redeemer's Way, where Pastor Dave talked about the 4 cups of the Passover meal, and specifically the cup of wrath, the 3rd cup. And we talked about how the Redeemer himself said, if there's any other way, let this cup pass. Last week, Pastor Mitchell talking about the shepherd's way. Well, Jesus was strengthened in his time of prayer. And God does some mystical and unexplainable things in prayer. But today we're going to look at a part of the passage we often overlook. Let us rise and go. The betrayer's at hand. That this moment that moved Jesus to action. I'm calling today's message the King's Way. We'll talk about the King's path. If you've got your Bibles, like I said, Matthew chapter 26, we're entering into dark time. Literally, it's nighttime. And it's probably, although close to a city, fairly quiet. And we get a glimpse into a prayer unlike we do in most places in the Bible. It says that Jesus went with his disciples. He's just had the Last Supper. They've celebrated the Passover meal. As Pastor Mitchell said last week, that Jesus said, I've been looking forward to this Passover celebration, not just the Passover, this one. Remember, it was days earlier where they laid down palm branches and cried, Hosanna in the highest, our Savior has come. But now they're leaving the upper room and they go to this place. He goes with his disciples, not Judas. Judas is left to betray him. They still don't realize who it is that will betray him, but it's Jesus and most of the disciples, to a place called Gethsemane. And we've talked about in this series, we've titled the series Pressed. The Gethsemane actually is significant because it's 2 Aramaic words put together, gat and the other part, semene. And gat means press. The second part of the word means oil. It's the oil press. It's an olive garden, but it's not just poetic. Jesus is being pressed here. It's the only place in the Bible where we see him ask for relief from the cross. He sees something here he's never seen before. Look at the text. I'll show you when. He said to them, sit here, he says to the whole group, while I go over there and pray. But he took Peter and the 2 sons of Zebedee, James and John, along with him, and he began to be sorrowful and troubled. He's known of the cross the whole time. He's said it multiple times throughout his ministry, but something happens here. He wants them to know what it's like. He said to them, my soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me. So he doesn't even ask them to pray. He just says, keep watch. Some of your translations may say, look, be aware, be alert. Saying, just watch. Stay here, keep watch with me. Verse 39, going a little further, he fell down with his face to the ground and prayed, my Father. He does this 3 times. Matthew shows us all of them together. My Father, if it's possible, may this cup be taken from me, yet not as I will desire, but as you desire. Hardest prayer in the Bible, in my opinion. To surrender our desires for his, especially when his are costly and ours are comfortable. Then he returned to his disciples and found them sleeping. Couldn't you men keep watch with me for 1 hour? He asked Peter. Why Peter? Peter said, I'll die for you. You can't even stay awake. Watch and pray, he tells them again. Now he's asking them to pray, verse 41, so that you will not fall into temptation for yourself. There's a battle. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. There's more there than just this moment. Verse 42, he went away a second time and prayed, and so here we get the second prayer by Jesus. My Father, if it is not possible for this cup to be taken away unless I drink it, may your will, desire be done. And when he came back, he again found them sleeping because their eyes were heavy, physically exhausted. Verse 44, so he left them and went away once more and prayed a 3rd time, saying the same thing. Then he returned, and here's where we'll focus today. He returned to the disciples and said to them, are you still sleeping and resting? You shouldn't be tired anymore. You keep sleeping. Look. Remember what he told them to do? Look, watch, look. The hour has come. That's significant. We don't have time today to unpack that. But if you go through the Gospel of Matthew, It keeps, my hour has not yet come. The hour is near, but now it's here. Look, the hour has come, and the Son of Man, and we don't have time to unpack all that either, but in Daniel, he's called the Son of Man. It's a reference to the Messiah. It's not just saying his humanity. He's fully God and fully man here. But he says, the Son of Man is delivered into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us go. Here comes my betrayer. And so Jesus, after this moment of prayer, moves into action. He stands up, rise up, let's go. We're going to take action. After being pressed, and what's on the inside comes out, just like in the olive press, there's this weight, this rock that's put on the olive oil, or on the olives. This oil comes out. The oil's what's valuable. And they do it multiple times to get all the oil they can get out, the purest of the oils. Jesus pressed multiple times here. We see what's inside comes out. And what he steps into is not easy. It's not that God relieved the pressure. It's not that there's a new peace. It's not ease. It's not comfort. He's walking into, he says, my betrayer's at hand. They don't even know who that is yet. Somehow. But each time he goes back, they're sleeping. Did you notice that? Watch. All you got to do, be aware. Nope, they're sleeping. Come on. All right, watch and pray. I'll give you something to do. Pray too. Pray for yourself. The flesh and the spirit. And say, nope, fall asleep again. All right, get up. We got to go. So I try to wake my kids up in the morning sometimes when that happens. Wake up. Yep. They hit the snooze button. Alarm goes back off 15 minutes. How are you still in bed? All right, back up again. Oh, eventually it's like, doesn't matter. Don't get to brush your hair today. Let's go. 3 times. Like, what do you think that was like? But then you see Jesus, it's like this resolve, like it's happening here. And what we see is a godly ambition. Ambition in the church gets a bad rap. It doesn't get a bad rap in the Bible. It's okay to be ambitious. It's okay to be driven. A lot of times in the church, somebody's driven. And you're like, oh, it's their pride. It's their ego. They're trying to build their own kingdom. It's worldly. It's other flight. They just want money. We'd make success sound bad. You know, we want faithfulness, not fruitfulness. It was like, why can't you have both? And Jesus has godly ambition. Even mature Christians sometimes have a hard time discerning the difference between selfish ambition and godly ambition. Godly ambition is surrendered. If you have drive without surrender, that's pride. But when you have spirit-led, surrendered ambition, that's a holy fire. And that's what Jesus has. Just read the story where two of these guys, James and John, the sons of Zebedee, and it depends on which version you read, whether you read Matthew's version or Mark's version. There's the version where the mom's the one who asks for them. I'd be like, God, can you just put that out of there? Don't put that in there. Their mom goes to Jesus after Jesus has just said that he's going to be crucified, killed, and die, says, can my sons have the 2 highest seats in the kingdom? They couldn't even come themselves. Okay, that bothers me, but Jesus does not rebuke their ambition. He flips upside down their priorities. He redefines greatness. Says, you want to be great? Serve. In that famous verse, Mark chapter 10, verse 45, even the Son of Man didn't come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom. If you've got an ambition and it's under the mission of God, that's a holy fire in your soul. That's what we see with Jesus. And all he's asking his guys to start off with here is an awareness. And what we're going to see here is that Jesus then walks the king's way, the king's path. And he's going in a way that's a costly way. And he's trying to show them what it's like. And it begins with awareness and then moves to urgency. Urgency is the fuel in the heart that puts it in motion. And so, preview of the points today, there's awareness. The king's way begins with awareness. It's moved by urgency into motion, action. A lot of times we think that prayer means a passivity, just a sitting by and waiting, and that's not what we see here with Jesus. Sometimes what God does is he moves our hearts. He aligns us with him and changes our desires, and sometimes he moves us into action, and sometimes he allows us, because we're so emotionally moved, often in a bad way, to let it out, and he already knows to relate. But here, what we see, like I said, the king's way of ambition begins with awareness. Then he, Jesus, in verse 45, he returned to the disciples, the 3 specifically. The 3rd time, they've been sleeping, and he says, are you sleeping and resting? And I know we've been in this passage for 4 weeks now, but I want you to enter back into that moment. Think about what it was like. Like I said, it's nighttime, so it's dark. It's mostly quiet, but they are close to a city. You can hear some things. The betrayer is not there yet. There's no torches in the distance, but the temperature has probably dropped. It's evening. There's a weight about the moment before you even get into the prayer, just because Jesus has told them, one of you is going to betray me. Peter, you'll deny me before the rooster crows 3 times. And even though he doesn't get it, they can all sense it's going to happen. The Old Testament said they will all be scattered. They'll all abandon him. And that soon will happen. The arrest is about to take place. Jesus goes to pray, and he prays so intensely that Luke, the doctor, he tells us that he sweats drops of blood. Now, if you study this passage, you'll see there are a lot of theories about what this is, but there is a medical condition known that people have experienced under extreme stress, and the people that we know have experienced it, soldiers and prisoners who are about to be executed, where your capillaries burst at the surface of your skin, and your blood blends with your sweat, and it appears your skin is bleeding. It appears that Jesus is under that level of stress. And it said, and I read it quickly, and I hope you got it. I tried to set you up before I read it, that he began to feel sorrowful. What happened at that moment? Because it wasn't just his knowledge of scourging and thorn of crowns and being betrayed and the mocking and the physicality of the cross he's known the whole time. He's talked about it repeatedly. What I believe is happening here is he's beginning to experience isolation. That he'll eventually cry out from the cross, my God, why have you forsaken me?" The Trinity, eternally, always in harmony, now separated, as he becomes your and my sin. And I've never asked myself this question before. I've preached, almost 20 Easters and read this passage for a long time. But this week, I know theologically, I know what happens. I don't want to ruin the story for you, but Jesus does die on the cross. But I asked, could he have died in the garden? And medically, the answer is yes. One, because of the extreme stress, and there's a medical condition for that. And 2, because of the separation from his Father. There's a technical term for it, but in culture, we call it, and it's rare, but broken heart syndrome. Maybe you've heard of it. An elderly couple, one of them dies, they've been married for 50 or 60 years, and sometimes within days, but within the first 6 months, the heart attack rate for the other spouse is incredibly high, but it's not actually a heart attack, it's broken heart syndrome. You may remember a woman, Debbie Reynolds, her daughter, Princess Leia, Carrie Fisher, died. The next day she died of a heart attack. They said it was actually broken heart syndrome. Some of my doctor friends and science friends may be able to pronounce that. I cannot, so I won't try. But it's real. There was an uptick in heart attacks of spouses of those whose spouse died in the 9/11 attacks. Jesus says here, I'm overwhelmed to the point of death. Luke 22:44, and beginning in anguish, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat was like drops of blood falling to the ground. Dave preached on the 4 cups. The 3rd cup is the cup of wrath, which is spoken of throughout the Old Testament. Jeremiah 25:15 says this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, said to me, take from my hand this cup filled with the wine of my wrath. This weight that Jesus experienced, this pressing, Isaiah describes it, Isaiah 53:6. We all of us, acknowledge it or not, all like sheep have gone astray. What Jesus is doing is like David did for the ewe lamb, like Caleb did for his pit bull. He's putting himself in danger. He's chasing after us. We all, like sheep, have gone astray. Each of us has turned to our own way. There's a way that seems right to man, leads to death. Jesus is showing us another way, and the Lord has laid on himself the iniquities, that's our sin, of us all. That's the weight he's experiencing, he's beginning to experience in the garden. The weight of sin and of shame and of the world and of separation from his Father and isolation. My God, my God. Why have you forsaken me? And these guys can't stay awake. 3 times he comes back. My soul is overwhelmed to the point of death, he tells them before he goes the first time. And he takes these 3 that are the closest humans on earth to him. Just watch. Each time. Are you sleeping still? Still sleeping and resting. What you're not awake to, you will not act on. Imagine 2 a.m. Monday morning till late tonight. Hopefully you've been asleep for a few hours, 4 or 5 hours maybe, and the fire alarm goes off. Sleep through it? I mean, it's just the batteries, right? No big deal. But why is it that people die from carbon monoxide poisoning? Because they're not aware. Cancer? How did you not catch it until stage 4? It was treatable earlier. Unaware. A much lighter illustration. You miss your exit on the highway, and in spite of what your spouse thinks, you didn't do it on purpose. You were unaware of the moment. We can't act on what we're not aware of. Are you aware of the moments in your life? To flip it and think about it in a way that maybe like a business talk would go at a seminar or a motivational speaker would give. Those of you who have some experience in life, maybe you've been in the workforce for 10, 20 years and got some kids or wherever you're at, what would you tell your 20-year-old self? Now, if you're not 20 yet, I'm not asking you, but what would you tell your 20-year-old self? And you oftentimes, because of hindsight, would say, oh, I wish I would have known these things you weren't aware of in the moment. One of the great things about reading the Bible and then not realizing it's actually speaking to you and about you is sometimes we see characters and we go, how did you not get this? I think of Esau in the Old Testament. There's these 2 brothers in the book of Genesis, and you can read it on your own. There's a little excerpt in Genesis chapter 25 where these 2 brothers that are always at battle. One of them's kind of rugged, and he's outside all the time. He's a hunter. That's Esau. The other one's indoorsy. He's a chef. That's Jacob. Jacob's a deceiver, opportunistic, a liar. What happens is that Esau's been out in the field, and he's the firstborn. It's significant to be the firstborn in the Old Testament because you get the majority of the inheritance. The legacy will come through you. And this legacy, by the way, it's the Abrahamic covenant, the promise that you will have more seed, and that was a big deal, than you can see. More land than you can see. He's going to be rich, and he's going to be remembered. His life is significant because of his birthright. You get a birthright and a blessing as the firstborn. But one day he comes in from the field and he's hungry. And he smells this stew. It's lentil stew if you read the text. It doesn't even have beef tips in it. Oh man, it's like beans. And so he says, give me some of the stew to Jacob. And Jacob says, sell me your birthright. Pretty shrewd. Kind of a lowball offer. But Esau, who doesn't recognize the moment, unaware, is a man of the moment, led by the flesh. What good is a birthright? I'm starving to death. And he takes the stew. It's not until 40 years later he regrets it. 40 years later, he's not going, well, it was good lentil stew. And then 40 years later, his brother's stealing his blessing as well, lies and pretends to be Esau. And Esau comes in, and like a little baby, he's weeping. Dad, don't you have another blessing? Can't you bless me at all? I've already promised Jacob that you'd bow down to him, you and your descendants. Oh, because he missed the moment. You can't act on what you're not aware of. Don't you think he'd go back and change that? What if you knew the future? Wouldn't you change how you live? Have you ever seen Back to the Future 2? Biff, the bully, gets access to time travel, buys the sports almanac, huh? Or you could get, stock market and buy Apple before Steve Jobs even invented it, whatever. He becomes a billionaire because he knows everything that's going to happen before it happens. What if spiritually we knew all that was actually happening? Because to Esau, that was just a meal. But it wasn't just a meal. It was a moment that would define his legacy. It's interesting how the New Testament speaks of Esau, because just even though we didn't read the text, trust me, there's no naked women in the passage. There is no sexual encounter. But do you know what Hebrews says about Esau? Hebrews says that Esau was godless and sexually immoral. Listen to this. Hebrews 12, 16 and 17. See that no one is sexually immoral or is godless like Esau. And what is it talking about? Maybe it's a different encounter. Nope. Who for a single meal sold his inheritance rights as the oldest son. Afterwards, as you know, when he wanted to inherit this blessing, he was rejected, even though he sought the blessing with tears. He could not change what he had done. He missed his moment. And they're defined as godless and sexually immoral. Read it. You can know the Hebrew. There's no naked lady there. It's beans. But he was impulsive. When you're driven by your flesh, you're dull to what's spiritual. Enter another firstborn, also hungry, also outdoors in the wilderness for 40 days, led by the Spirit into the wilderness for 40 days and 40 nights with no food. And then the temptation, turn these stones to bread. But he doesn't do it because he's on a no-carb diet. No, because he knows he has the power to do it. Eating bread's not the problem. The problem is using his gifts and talents for his own selfish gain rather than God's mission, taking a shortcut to satisfaction rather than seeking God's will. Different ambition. Throw yourself from the temple. Yeah, you can keep going through them and paralleling them with Esau, but here's the reality. What Esau saw was stew. What Jesus saw was sin. Esau sold his birthright. Jesus purchased yours because he was willing to walk the king's way, even though it was costly. He wasn't going to get glory without the cross. He knew the cross was part of the deal, but he was aware. Awareness is not obedience, but awareness is required. Awareness leads us to urgency. It begins with awareness. Ambition is then fueled by urgency. You look at what he says. Then he returned to the disciples and said to them, are you still unaware, sleeping and resting? Look, the hour. I've told you before it's not here. I've told you it's near. This is it. It's come. The Son of Man is to be delivered, not from the things that I was asking the cup to pass, but into the things, into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us go. Here comes my betrayer. Hey, not when you're ready. Brush your hair. Oh, I'd give you extra 15. Nope, let's go. There's an urgency here. When I used to coach, I coach a sport called futsal. It's like indoor soccer. We'll just say that for the simplicity of this. I used to tell the girls, play as fast as you can, but don't be in a hurry. And you think about how professional athletes execute. They're really fast, faster than you probably realize. But when they rush, they make mistakes. When they hurry, they're impulsive. Go as fast as you can, don't be in a hurry. The time is now. Let's go. Rise up. Some translations, the CSV, say, we must go. The betrayer is at hand. There's an urgency here. It's a holy urgency. Jesus isn't rushing. This is not an impulsivity, but it's time, and we're not going to miss the moment. Go. And so, if you're at your house at 2 a.m. and the alarm goes off, you don't start making a spreadsheet, do you? When did I change the batteries? What is the problem? Get out of the house. Grab the dog. Get the kids. Move. It's time to take action. And if it was just a battery issue, you'll learn that too. But it's time to go. And sometimes what happens in life is that you think, well, I didn't get ready for this. I wasn't prepared. And well, with whatever you have, you do the best you can, surrendered to God, led by His Spirit, and let Him deal with the results. Do you remember the story of Captain Sully? He landed the plane on the Hudson River. It was leaving LaGuardia. It was coming to Charlotte, North Carolina. About 4 minutes into the flight, flock of geese fly into the engines of the plane, and both engines go out, and he's the captain. There's 155 souls, the way it's defined in the aviation world, on board. And he wasn't thinking to himself, well, I've always wanted to try this maneuver that no one else has ever done. They told him to go back, head back to LaGuardia. He thought, too low, too slow, not enough time. And while there was controversy afterwards, he landed the plane, everyone survived. He described the feeling in the moment. In the moment, the way that he said that he felt was the worst sickening pit in his stomach, falling through the floor feeling. But he responded. 4 minutes in, no time to really analyze. Here's what he said after. One way of looking at this is that for 42 years, I've been making small, regular deposits in this bank of experience, education, and training. And on January 15th, he made the withdrawal. See, many of you don't realize that everything's spiritual. That deal that happened, it's not just spiritual when you're at church in the sanctuary. It's in the boardroom too. And the deal that happened for Esau and Jacob, that was in a kitchen at their house about his spiritual legacy. You think that when we give you these books and tell you about the discipleship pathway, that like whatever you're learning in that moment is your education and training. Everything's been spiritual. God's preparing you for every moment all throughout your life, all as it's been happening. Every encounter, everything that's been wrong, everything that's been right, all part of the equipping for the moment. But when you try to do it in your own flesh, that's the kind of ambition that you burn that out. Surrender to the Spirit. You have everything that you need. You just don't know it yet until you step in. Jesus is the one that steps in to courage here. He's the one that's been repeatedly told before this prayer ever happened, don't go to Jerusalem, they're going to kill you. Who goes? He does. He knows the cross is coming. But here he began to feel something different, and he still steps forward. And he's saying to them, be aware, now it's time. Now we got to go. If it was the Old Testament, it's Esther. For such a time as this is why you're here. Nehemiah, build these walls. That's why you're here. Esther, defend these people. Jesus, go to the cross. For you, me, Spirit's got to lead you. I don't know. But there should be an urgency. Why urgent? Well, one, the Bible tells us really clearly, we don't have that long. James chapter 4 and verse 14, what is your life? It's just a vapor. Here today, gone tomorrow. A lot of us don't think that's true, especially if you're younger. You don't think that's true? I had lunch this week with a gentleman that I respect a lot. He's 80 years old. And he just looked at me, and he didn't realize this was impactful to me in the moment, but he said, this isn't an infant game, Scott. Like, he knows. He's talking about his legacy. He knows, huh? I don't know if it's 1 or 10, 15 more years, but I'm closer to the end than I am the beginning. And whether you live to be 12 or 22 or 82, in light of eternity, it's all a vapor. This week I was reading and read a story about a young lady named Allie Rasmussen. She's not the gymnast, some of you may know, but a volleyball player, 12-year-old volleyball player in Utah. In fact, we got a picture of her. She got a new jersey, and her dad took a picture of her the day she got the new jersey. That night she was wearing that jersey, and she had a brain aneurysm and died. I'll read you her obituary, the beginning of it. Our sweet daughter, sister, and granddaughter, Allie, passed away suddenly at the age of 12 on Friday, March 14th, 2025, from a spontaneous subarachnoid hemorrhage. It's brain aneurysm. She was born on January 19th, 2013 in Richfield, Utah, to Josh and Molly Rasmussen of Ephraim, Utah. Allie was the youngest of 5 children with 4 older brothers, much to her dismay and delight. Allie was the first in the family to wear pink. And he goes on to talk about what she enjoyed, what she wanted to be, what her personality was like. And I watched an interview of her parents devastated at the pure shock that she was gone. No one's promised tomorrow. It's been appointed for each one of us a day to die, and after that, judgment. And no matter when it happens, it's like a vapor. And not only that, you have an enemy who wants to destroy you. So life is short, Satan's real. Pastor Mitchell mentioned the verse last week. He's like a roaring lion seeking whom he may devour, and other people's needs are real too. The Apostle Paul, who says in the book of Romans that his ambition is to preach the cross, also says in the book of Romans about other people's needs, The hour has already come for you to wake up from your slumber. Well, that parallels this passage. Because our salvation is nearer now than when we first believed. I don't know when you believed. Maybe you were 5, maybe you were 15, maybe it's today. But it's closer to being fully realized now than it was then, than when I started making that statement. Then right now, it keeps getting closer, and it's just a vapor. There should be a spiritual urgency. Is there? The urgency is the fuel that moves us to motion, and that's our third point. That the king's way, the ambition, that moves towards God's will and not away from pain. Or I could say, moves towards God's desire and does not run from difficulty. Rise, let us go. Here comes my betrayer. Okay, interesting. It shows here that Jesus is fully in control of this. I don't know if you could see the torches in the distance and he was just saying, here comes my betrayer, as if it's one of these guys with the torches and clubs and swords coming towards us, or he's naming Judas. We do know that he knew the whole time. Go read John chapter 6. When Jesus had a whole bunch of people, thousands of people coming to him to be fed, and he says, eat my flesh and drink my blood, and everyone leaves. Verse 65 and 66, he turns to his disciples and says, are you leaving too? Peter says, where are we going to go? You have the words of eternal life. Only you have them. But Judas is mentioned, and he's called the betrayer. Jesus has known the whole time he's going to betray him. And here he is. He's been sweating drops of blood, the darkness of this moment, the weight of sin, starting to be isolated from his Father, beginning to experience death before he even goes to the cross. And he says, let's go. Let's do it. And it says that he says to them, rise, let's go. Here comes my betrayer. And then you look at what happens next. Look at the next part of the passage. Verse 47. We don't have time to unpack this whole thing, but look at it. He was still speaking, and Judas, while he was still speaking, Judas, one of the 12, arrived. And the guys are probably going, oh, maybe it's him. And there was a large crowd with him with swords and clubs, and they were sent from the chief priests and the elders of the people. Now the betrayer, Matthew doesn't even call him Judas here. Let's call him what he is. The betrayer had arranged a signal with them. There's 2 times in the New Testament Jesus is kissed. I'll challenge you to find the other one. I won't tell you about it today. It's a study of contrasts. In Judaism, in the Jewish culture, a kiss was a sign of devotion. To call someone your rabbi is someone you've submitted yourself to and said, I'm going to walk in your steps. I will learn just by being in your dust, is what you're saying. Here's what Judas had told the army that he got the money to sell Jesus out he would do. The one I kiss is the man, arrest him. Going at once, Judas said, greetings, Rabbi, the pinnacle of hypocrisy. I have a friend who's recently come to know Christ. I've been meeting with him and talking to him about growing in his faith. I've warned him about church. The church is God's plan to reach the world. The church is the place where God is moving actively, and we are his chosen people. But we're broken. And when you read the Bible, what you end up seeing is you end up seeing that the people who oftentimes speak the most overtly for God are the most opposed to God, whether they know it or not. There's always a remnant of faithful. I'm just challenging my friend. I want you to know the heart of Jesus, because sometimes you can go to church and people are going to tell you to do stuff that's actually counter the Bible. They don't even know they're doing that. They've just assimilated into church, the way we say it throughout the history of our church, over church and under Jesus. It's not because we're against the church, but you've got to recognize the church is full of sinners. Satan comes as an angel of light. Be alert. Judas here is using all the right language and doing all the wrong stuff. But it's been promised that's how it would happen. Psalm 41:9. Even my close friend, someone I trusted, one who shared my bread, has turned against me. All of them will be scattered, the Old Testament teaches us. What blows my mind is what Jesus says in verse 50. Do what you came for, friend. Friend? Even after the kiss? After the betrayal? I don't know. Then the men stepped forward, seized Jesus, arrested him. Short summary, a fast forwarding. And Peter cuts one of their ears off. Jesus heals the guy's ear. The rest of the army doesn't go, whoa, he just healed his ear. Maybe he is the guy. Nope, they still arrest him. He says, every day I sat in the temple courts teaching. You didn't arrest me? But this is all taking place. He wants them to know how hard their heart is. This is all taking place that the writings of the prophets might be fulfilled. Then all the disciples deserted him and fled. They all abandoned. Couldn't stay awake. I'll die for you. Nope. But Jesus is walking a different way, the King's way. Do you know in the Old Testament there's actually a roadway called the King's Highway? You can find it in Numbers chapter 20 and verse 17, Numbers chapter 21, I think it's verse 22, might be verse 21. But what happens there, and back up, get the full context, remember Jesus said he was looking forward to celebrate this Passover. Do you know what the Passover is? The Passover is a celebration Jewish people did every year for hundreds of years, because what happened in the Old Testament is that when God set his people free, delivered them from Egyptian bondage, he told them, if you'll take a lamb, sacrifice the lamb, put the blood on the doorpost, the death angel will pass over your house and not kill the firstborn. But all the Egyptian firstborn, they'll be killed. So it's a memory of a sacrificial lamb, shed blood, and God's mercy and grace. He says, I've been looking forward to this one. Well, what happens is God leads the people across the Red Sea, miraculously delivers them. They're delivered, they're not transformed. They get to the edge of the promised land, all the abundance that God has promised, the abundant life, a land flowing with milk and honey, giant grapes, giant fruit. The series we're going to do after Easter is on the fruit of the Spirit. It's all going to be from a couple verses in Galatians. Talking about the new life, how we as followers of Christ should have a supernatural abundance of the things that passage talks about. But they missed their moment. Full story, 12 spies, 10 were bad, 2 were good. And because they don't courageously move in that moment, they've got 40 years of wandering aimlessly in the desert. The New Testament says to us, today, if the Holy Spirit speaks to your heart, do not harden your heart like they did in the desert, in the wilderness. And then, that's Numbers 13 and 14. In Numbers chapter 20, we're now about 38 years later, which has been 40 years of wandering in the wilderness at this point now. And they come to a place called Edom, Esau's descendants. The Edomites, they were commanded not to go to war with in Deuteronomy. But do they know that? And they come and they say, and read the passage, Numbers chapter 20, verse 17, can we just travel on the King's Highway? It's this highway that would be the fastest path to the promised land. And they promise, like, we won't make a mess. We won't touch anything. We won't disturb anything. Just let us go through. Nope. So what do? They don't fight because they've been commanded not to. And we often don't give them credit for that. Because in the next chapter, chapter 21, they come to a different town, same highway. It might be days, it might be weeks later. And they ask to go on the King's Highway. Nope. And they get attacked. And God says, you fight. And they do. And they win. And they begin to take the promised land because they recognize the moment, even when God says no or says go. A few hundred years later, not the same geographical location, but metaphorically, the prophet Isaiah tells us about a highway. Isaiah chapter 35 and verse 8. And a highway will be there. It will be called the way of holiness. Only the redeemed will walk there. 700 years later, Jesus, who called himself the way hours before, says, come, let's go. Rise up. It's going to be costly. And he walks it. They scatter. And I just ask you, what's God calling you to? What moves you? Does prayer? Does the Holy Spirit? To your flesh? Impulsiveness? Or surrendered? I conclude with the prayer that Pastor Bryce prayed right before I preached. You don't have to stand. You don't have to recite it. You can just have me pray it over you, or you can recite it with me, however you'd like. Father, we stand before you, humbled by the weight of this moment in Scripture. Jesus faced the cross with courage while his followers struggled to focus. Lord, awaken us today. That's a good prayer. Let us not be found sleeping when you call us to stand. Strengthen us. Supernatural strengthening, like when the angel visited him in Luke Luke chapter 24, I think it's verse 42. Strengthen us to rise in faith and follow you no matter the where you lead. Father, I pray over every person today. May we not be found sleeping when you call us to act. May we stand firm when trials come. May we rise with boldness following Jesus. Strengthen our faith, fill us with courage, keep us awake and ready for your purposes. In Jesus' powerful and victorious name, amen.